Why Russia sold Alaska. This wasn't just a land deal, it was a fire sale. Russia wasn't simply selling a massive piece of its empire, it was desperately trying to escape a geopolitical nightmare that was about to swallow Alaska whole. When the United States bought Alaska in 1867 for a mere $7.2 million, the immediate reaction was mockery. The deal was scornfully labeled Seward's Folly and Seward's Icebox, a foolish purchase of a barren, frozen wasteland. But what if I told you that for Russia, this wasn't a blunder? It was a calculated, desperate move born from a shocking mix of economic collapse and geopolitical terror. They weren't just selling land, they were fleeing a disaster they knew was coming. The story of why Russia gave up Alaska is one of history's most misunderstood deals. It's a tale of a humbled empire, a bitter rivalry, and a geopolitical chess move that would reshape the world map in ways no one at the time could have imagined. This is the real story of why Russia sold Alaska. The problem: a wounded and bankrupt bear. To understand why a country would sell off a territory more than twice the size of Texas, we have to go back a decade before the sale to the disastrous Crimean War. From 1853 to 1856, the Russian Empire fought a brutal conflict against an alliance of the Ottoman Empire, France, and its greatest rival, Great Britain. The war was a catastrophic defeat for Russia. It didn't just weaken the Imperial Russian army and undermine its influence in Europe, it completely drained the treasury. Russia stumbled out of the war exhausted, its finances in ruins, and its monetary system in disarray. An Anglo-French naval blockade had crippled Russia's trade, and the government had been forced to issue a flood of banknotes to fund the war, creating a massive financial crisis that would linger for decades. Russia was, for all intents and purposes, bankrupt. Emperor Alexander II and his ministers had to admit that without serious reforms and a modern industrial base, the empire could no longer call itself a great power. This crushing defeat left a deep-seated fear in the Russian leadership. They'd been exposed, and they knew their vulnerabilities were now obvious to their enemies, especially one enemy in particular, Great Britain. And one of their most vulnerable possessions was a massive, remote, and seemingly indefensible territory thousands of miles away. Alaska. An economic nightmare. The unprofitable North. Even before the Crimean War, Alaska, then known as Russian America, was already a serious economic liability. The initial draw to the territory was the fur trade. Russian explorers, starting with Vitus Bering in 1725, were lured to the region by its huge populations of sea otters, whose pelts were incredibly valuable. The Russian-American Company was chartered in 1799 to exploit these resources, and for a while, it worked. But by the mid-19th century, the profits had vanished. Overhunting had absolutely decimated the sea otter population, causing the once-booming fur trade to collapse. With its main source of income gone, the colony became a money pit. It was incredibly difficult and expensive to supply. The permanent Russian population in Alaska never grew beyond a few hundred people, and the harsh climate made large-scale farming impossible. This meant every single provision had to be shipped over vast distances from Siberia or imported from places like California, all at a huge cost. The Russian-American Company was failing. Its charter was set to expire, and in 1862, the government refused to renew it. At the same time, Russia's attention was shifting. After new treaties with China, Russia acquired the Amur Basin and territories that would become the port of Vladivostok. This new region offered far better access to the Pacific and Asian markets, making the remote, unprofitable, and hard-to-manage colony in North America seem even less important. Alaska was no longer a strategic asset. It was a drain on an already empty treasury. Section 3. The Geopolitical Gambit, a calculated retreat. While the economic problems were bad, the real motivation behind the sale was pure geopolitical fear. After the humiliation of the Crimean War, Russia looked at Alaska and saw a trap. The territory was bordered by British North America, what would later become Canada. During the war, Britain had already shown its naval superiority by attacking Russian interests in the Pacific. Russian leaders, especially Emperor Alexander II and his brother, Grand Duke Konstantin Nikolaevich, were terrified that in the next inevitable conflict with Great Britain, Alaska would be the first thing to go. The colony was practically indefensible. A small British force could easily sail over and seize the entire territory, and the bankrupt Russian state could do nothing to stop them. The thought of their arch-rival, Britain, not only conquering their land but also setting up shop directly across the Bering Sea from Siberia was a strategic nightmare. Adding to this fear was the simple reality of American expansion. The idea of manifest destiny was a powerful force in the United States, and Russian officials saw the relentless westward push of American settlers. They'd already seen what happened in California during the gold rush, and rumors of gold in Alaska made them fear that American prospectors would soon overwhelm the tiny Russian presence there. To the Russians, an American takeover seemed inevitable, so they faced a grim choice. If they were going to lose Alaska anyway, wasn't it better to sell it to a friendly nation for some much-needed cash, rather than lose it for nothing to their greatest enemy? Selling to the United States would not only bring in money, but would also place a large American territory right on Britain's flank, neatly countering British power in the region. It was a desperate move, but from their perspective, it was the only logical one. This complex web of fear and finance is what drove Russia to the negotiating table. It's a side of the story we rarely hear, and if you're finding this deep dive into historical strategy fascinating, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. We unravel the hidden motives behind major historical events every week. Section 4. The Deal of the Century, a Midnight Negotiation. With the decision made in St. Petersburg, the stage was set in Washington, D.C. The key players were the Russian minister to the United States, Baron Eduard de Stuckel, and the ambitious U.S. Secretary of State, William H. Seward. Russia had actually started exploring a sale as early as 1857, but the looming American Civil War put all talks on hold. After the war, in late 1866, Tsar Alexander II gave Stuckel the green light to restart negotiations, setting a minimum price of $5 million. Stuckel approached Seward, a fierce believer in American expansion who had long dreamed of acquiring Alaska to project U.S. power in the Pacific. The negotiations moved with incredible speed. On the evening of March 29, 1867, Stuckel showed up at Seward's home to announce he'd just received approval from the Tsar. Unwilling to wait even a day, Seward famously asked, "Why wait till tomorrow, Mr. Stuckel? Let us make the treaty tonight." They gathered their clerks and worked through the night at the State Department, hammering out the final details. Stuckel pushed for a higher price, and Seward eventually agreed to $7.2 million. At 4 o'clock in the morning on March 30, 1867, the treaty was signed. The United States had just acquired nearly 600,000 square miles of land for a price that amounted to about 2 cents an acre. The fire sale was complete. The ironic aftermath. Seward's folly. Despite Seward's excitement, the American public and press weren't exactly thrilled. The purchase was widely mocked by critics like newspaper editor Horace Greeley. It was dubbed Seward's Folly, Seward's Icebox, and a polar bear garden. Many argued that taxpayer money had been wasted on a barren wasteland of ice and rock, money that would be better spent on reconstruction after the Civil War. However, this opposition wasn't as widespread as the Seward's Folly myth makes it seem. Many newspapers, especially on the West Coast, supported the purchase, seeing Alaska as a gateway for trade with Asia and a strategic move against British Columbia. The treaty was championed in the Senate by Charles Sumner, who, after studying the territory's potential, delivered a powerful 3-hour speech that helped secure its ratification. On October 18, 1867, the Russian flag was lowered in Sitka, and the American flag was raised, formally transferring the territory to the United States. For 3 decades, the U.S. paid little attention to its new possession, and critics felt they had been right all along. Then, everything changed. In 1896, a major gold deposit was discovered in the Yukon, and Alaska became the gateway to the Klondike Gold Rush. The Icebox was suddenly a treasure chest. The perception of the purchase transformed overnight from a folly into a masterstroke. Seward, who had passed away years earlier, was finally vindicated. From folly to fortune, the Klondike Gold Rush was just the start. In the 20th century, Alaska would reveal itself to be one of the most resource-rich regions on the planet, with vast reserves of oil, natural gas, fish, and timber. The Prudhoe Bay oil field, discovered in 1968, is still one of the largest in North America. The land bought for $7.2 million now holds resources estimated to be worth trillions. Beyond its economic value, Alaska gave the United States an unparalleled strategic position as a gateway to the Arctic and a window on Russia. The sale of Alaska is a story packed with irony. Russia sold the territory out of a desperate fear of British expansion and a desperate need for cash. They saw it as an indefensible liability and made what they believed was a clever geopolitical move to block their rival. In doing so, they handed their future Cold War adversary a massive strategic and economic advantage for a pittance. The American public initially saw it as a foolish waste of money, completely missing the immense potential lying dormant beneath the ice. The deal that was born from Russian terror and American ambition, and initially laughed at as Seward's Folly, ultimately turned out to be one of the most brilliant bargains in history.